today I'm here with Alcwyn, one of our senior developers. Can you just explain a little bit about your role?
Yeah, so as Hazel said, I'm a senior developer at Buzz. In the last couple of years, I've really been focusing on how Buzz can integrate AI technologies into our workflows and into our kind of internal tools, but also working with clients as well to integrate them.
Perfect. So today we're obviously talking about small language models. At Buzz, we're using all the large language models as well. But today we want to talk a little bit about how we can use these small language models in our business. So to start with, can you just tell me a little bit about what small language models are?
Yeah, of course. I think in order to start, you have to kind of first define what a large language model is. And these are the frontier models that people like Anthropic and OpenAI are using. So a large language model is basically a tool that's been trained on a vast amount of data, colossal amounts of data, and then it works as a bit of a black box. So you feed in instructions, prompts, those are broken down into tokens, and then the black box kind of predicts the output based on what you've asked it. So the interesting thing is that local models and small language models are just the same technology, but using the larger models, the people that create smaller models are using techniques such as distillation, pruning, to kind of pull the data around and make sure that we haven't got kind of redundant data in there, but also using quantization to reduce the precision of the models to a level where they can be a lot smaller with not too much noticeable difference. But then they can run on local machines, so we can have them in our own infrastructure.
Amazing. Obviously, that all sounds quite technical.
Yeah.
So when we're kind of talking about, making these models smaller, I guess sometimes that I've heard quite a lot of fine-tuning and using RAG and that kind of thing. Could you explain a bit about that side of it?
Yeah, of course. So these small models as general tools are great, but they're kind of, because you sort of reduce them down, they lack the kind of precision or like the recovery that like the big models have and things. But what you can do instead is you can make them more accurate to your business goals and to the kind of data that you're working with. So as you said, fine tuning is one way where we layer over a set of weights. So we can train and adapt the layer on our own data and change the fundamental behavior of the models in a way that aligns with our business goals for the outputs we're expecting. And so that's one way we can make a generalist local model more specific to the tasks required in our own businesses. So if we wanted something that summarized, emails for a daily report or something like that, we could train it to do that. And the other tools are things like RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation, and that's at the moment currently my favorite approach because it works like a box or a knowledge base. So the way that RAG works is that you keep the fundamental model the same. You don't change the underlying behavior, but instead you get like a virtual box where you put all of the important data for your goal. And the model uses that as a kind of way of retrieving information when you prompt it. So instead of going out to a really general amount of knowledge, you kind of scope the response based on that box. The box is actually a vector database, so that's kind of not important. But if that database doesn't have the answers, the model is more likely then to be honest about it and say, well, I don't have that answer, rather than hallucinating and making things up.
Yeah, which is obviously something we see with ChatGPT and Claude and things like 100%. That when you're asking, and it will just come up with an answer for you because it wants to give you an answer. Yeah. I guess from that perspective then, could you just put it into like a real world context of where someone might use that?
Definitely. So I think we'll probably get into sort of industries and stuff, but I think anywhere where maybe, well, one example might be medical records or something, anywhere where you kind of, you need to be able to have a conversation with your data. A RAG system is a really useful way of doing that. So conversational queries can be done with RAG so that you only scope to the patient's data rather than kind of general information. But it's a high level accuracy as from the response.
Brilliant. This actually works really nicely into kind of looking at the benefits of the small models and local models, obviously.
Of course.
So I guess actually kind of going off the back of the medical record side of it, security is a big thing. So what's the kind of situation around security?
Yeah, I mean, when we're using large language models, frontier models hosted by large companies, we're not really in control of how that data lands in their data centers and things. One of the benefits of local models is that we have complete control over the infrastructure and the networks that they run on. The caveat is if you don't set your network up, you still, you won't be secure. But if it's a perfect environment, then it's a closed loop. So your data never really leaves the building. You've got complete control over that. And when working with sensitive data, that's really, really critical. So yeah, security is definitely
perfect. And I guess actually, you're keeping all your stuff in-house. It's all on your own systems. That's great. I guess another point would be talking about the kind of regulatory side of it. So, what the difference is when you're using these large models and putting in sensitive data to, using these smaller ones, how that kind of works as well.
Yeah. So one of the reason I started pursuing small language models locally is because I realized that I was completely reliant on services that were completely out of my control. And so at any time, the regulations, the subscription models and things can all change underneath your own sort of workflows. And I wondered whether that was a sensible thing to do and whether a hybrid approach might be better. We have our ISO 27001, and obviously regulations, keeping control of your data is super critical. So I think at any time with a service hosted, the regulatory boundaries can change and the subscription fees can change. So relying wholeheartedly on that is probably not a great idea. At least with local models, you've got, it can't be taken from you. It's your service or your hosted tool.
Yeah, so you literally download it, you put it on your system, and then it's yours forever, essentially.
Exactly.
Obviously, you're going to want to update it at some point.
Yeah. But yeah, that's the other thing is, there's going to be no, updates that kind of change what you expect from responses and stuff because the company that's serving it has made it like updates that they feel are important, but maybe not important to your business goals. So nothing's going to change in your environment unless you wanted to.
Yeah, perfect. And I guess, obviously, looking at it from a kind of financial perspective, obviously someone might argue that kind of putting the time and effort into building a small model that works, or local model that works for their business, cost-wise, might be more than just using Claude and paying the subscription. So can you tell me a little bit about your thoughts around that?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because there's obviously balance with this type of discussion. You need good enough hardware that you can run these models, and that's not super cheap. So you can, we're using in the office, we use Mac Studios with sort of 32 to 48 gig of RAM, and we can do some pretty useful stuff with that. And you can buy something like an NVIDIA DGX Spark, and that's not super expensive in the kind of, it's still $3 or $4 grand, but so you've still got to buy the hardware. But once you've bought the hardware, running the model just costs electric, and I think that's it. And the cost of buying the equipment and balancing that with the robustness of not relying wholly on one service for all of your workflows and things, I think it's worth investing.
Yeah, and I guess it's the other side as well. See, when you're using something like Claude, you're paying a subscription, or ChatGPT, you're paying a subscription, and that could change in terms of what you're paying.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the exact numbers, but if there's a lot of talk about how these companies are using these subscriptions as loss leaders. So the amount you're paying for the subscription is a lot less than it costs to run the compute in the first place. And so it feels like the books are going to have to be balanced at some point, and the cost per token is going to go up. So there's always that side of things that you have to watch out for. And that's why not having all your eggs in one basket is really important, and just trying a hybrid approach.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that's the key, isn't it? It's having that hybrid. So I guess we should talk about it from an environmental perspective as well.
Yeah. So every prompt you make to ChatGPT or Claude goes up to a really vast data center with with all that training data, and sometimes all you're trying to do is review a small piece of code, and that feels like an overuse of the technology to use something so general and so vast to just check a bit of C# or something. So with small language models, they could be running on the same machine as you're working on. So there's definitely a kind of an efficiency to them, and so that stands to reason would probably be more sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess it's just going, like you said, your own electric, your own systems.
Exactly,
You're not kind of using a lot of water to cool it all down.
Yeah, and really focused tasks. That's the thing.
Perfect. So I guess kind of looking at, we've talked about some of the benefits and I think you've covered them really well. So now looking at what some of the shortfalls might be, where is its downfall essentially?
Yeah, I think the core the core thing is the steep learning curve to set up. So these things are wonderful when they're up and running and working well, but actually just getting the right setup in the first place can take a lot of technical know-how. And so I think that's one of the core things. The other thing is that local models are less forgiving. And so you need to be a lot more precise with how you plan a task, how you action the task, and check the response of it for accuracy. The old saying of rubbish in, rubbish out. You know, if you make a prompt with bad spelling, the bigger frontier models will just fix that for you. They come with like a bit of reasoning and some core larger context and things. So they just kind of on a daily basis, I type, especially in the morning, I type very badly, and my spelling is going into Claude, are all just fixed by the reasoning and things. Whereas with smaller models, you've got to be really precise, or you won't get the results you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool. So I guess in that sense, then, like you said, it can be more limited, but you're using it for much smaller tasks because they're more specialised, and therefore you've got the benefits of less environmental impact and things like that. As a B Corp, we obviously really care about that as well. So actually using them together is really important. So how, because we are using the bigger models at Buzz, how do we use them? When are we reaching for each one?
Yeah, so if it's all about scope of what you're doing and what you're trying to achieve. So if you're kind of doing a large planning thing where you might be doing a bit of research and summarizing a few documents, bringing in some images and stuff to then plan out an entire project scope with your entire task board and things, that's where a frontier model is critical, because the scope's so vast and you're kind of jumping between modes all the time.
And just to clarify, frontier, we're talking large models.
Yeah. Frontier, kind of the top kind of models, usually hosted because it's impossible to host them locally. Where was I going?
So the small models, when are we using them?
Oh yeah, that's right. So general is about if it's general and large, then I would use Claude all the time. But actually, where local models shine is kind of the long form tasks, very focused tasks. So if, for instance, code reviews is a great one. If you've got a system where you do automated code reviews, then you can have a local model with a really narrow focus, just really good at C# or TypeScript, and that can be watching your PRs come in and automatically run a first pass code review over them. And that's long form. So where the bigger models hosted run quite quickly, the token throughput on a smaller model is actually quite slow sometimes. So it's best not to use them for the kind of critical systems, but for things that are long form and running in the background, that's a great use of them.
And I suppose, one of the tools that you've introduced me to is obviously our Buzz client base, which is essentially running on a kind of more local system. And I guess, because obviously when you're talking about code and things like that, it's quite technical, it's all very development focused, but for the kind of everyday Joe who's maybe doing something like project management, what does something like the Buzz client base do for them?
Yeah, so the Buzz knowledge base is a RAG-based system. So we spoke about that earlier. But so every touch point with a client becomes a data point and gets saved in a vector database. And then we can have everything from transcripts, emails, any documents they send us get extracted and put in a form which is good for RAG, so usually JSON. And then anytime we want, we can have conversations about our clients with the system. So we can, if there's particular funding that needs to be used up by a certain amount, we can just ask the system, and it will review all of the transcripts and everything, and then feed back the best kind of answers it has. And this is kind of bringing everything together so that we've got all the important context in one place where we can kind of find a home for all of the data that we have.
Perfect. So I guess actually it would be really good to, obviously at Buzz, we love it. We're, using it really well. But if you're then looking at another industry, for example, manufacturing, what kind of context would they be using a small model in?
Yeah, great question. I think because small language models, there's a vast variety of them, and some of them will actually run on edge technology. That is technology that kind of is where the work is happening, but is often quite low power. You can run for manufacturing. You can take lots of sensor data and track all of that stuff and use it in maybe a air-gapped environment where you're not even connected to the internet. And you can process that the information, and rather than having to go away and get somebody to analyze the data, you can have it done in sort of near real time within that system using small language models. So.
Perfect. And I mean, it's not about taking people's jobs or anything. I know that there's a lot of concern around that when we're talking about AI. But the idea when you're using it in that context, because it is a small model, it's just making someone's job easier and getting it done a bit quicker.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, giving them the data or some sense to the data when they need it. That's in real time.
Perfect. Cool. So I guess kind of looking at, what kind of models are already out there, small models that you can just download. Have you got any examples where they're doing quite quick, easy things that you can actually have a little play with?
So do you mean as in getting up to just getting like experimenting with it?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think if you've got a little bit of technical know-how, then I think my advice would be to download something which is kind of almost zero setup, like Olama, which is a piece of software that will allow you to download and test models. And you can just have a chat in that graphical user interface and just see how the responses come out, and that will give you a chance to just try the models and see if they're going to work for you. If you're interested in picking the right model for your system, you can try something like LLM Fit, which will run on your machine, and then start pairing up the best models for that machine. So that's quite useful. I think obviously if you're not technical, come and talk to us. We'd love to hear about your ideas of how this stuff could be integrated into your sort of business.
Yeah, absolutely. And through our discovery and things like that, we can obviously help people work out what they actually need those tools for, if they really do need to be running massive models to do the work they're doing, or if they can do it from a smaller output. And I guess actually that feeds in really nicely to my next question, which was just going to be like, if someone is wondering about this, they're going to maybe try some of these tools. What do they do next, I guess?
So in terms of, integration or that sort of thing, or?
I guess where they can then take their work next. I mean, if they're looking, I guess a really good example would be going back to the medtech side of it.
Yeah.
They've had a little play around. They've not put any of their client data, their patient data in it yet. But what systems could they be integrating those kind of tools into?
Initially, I would be looking at the tasks that are carried out that are kind of the bottlenecks within their workflows, and I would be looking at just narrow focused goals that they could then automate using some small models. So it's about identifying those really kind of core uses. And then focusing on narrow tasks. And over time, I think once you've got one task working really well, you'd probably then sort of start seeing the opportunities everywhere.
And it's like you say, it could be as simple as just transcribing a meeting or, a session with a patient so that it's in your records and it's summarized.
Oh, absolutely, yes. So it's the small, really narrow tasks that are going to be great for this.
Perfect. So do you think that's the future? Do you think we're going to be moving into small models in the future? Are these large models going to kind of wither away?
It's all moving so fast. I'm unable to predict too much because it's just moving really quickly. I think I truly believe the frontier models being hosted will be around for a long time, but the gap is lessening as the small models become more optimized and the hardware becomes quicker, and so I think the future is a hybrid approach. You can't just rely on one or the other. You need to have resilience in an organization, and that's the best way to do it.
Perfect, brilliant. So I think now would be a really good time to answer some questions. So this is a great one. How can SMEs benefit the most from these small models?
Yeah, as I said, it's really about looking at those bottlenecks or those small tasks that can be optimized. I think it's starting with a realistic expectation of what you're going to achieve, making one person's life just a bit easier by automating a small process, so they don't have to do all the grunt work, all the kind of the boring stuff. I think aiming for those bottlenecks or those parts of your workflows where you get slowed, like things slow down because of it, I would be looking to automate those narrow tasks, and I think that's probably the way you can get most benefit.
Yeah, the best way to use it. Perfect. And I guess this is a really good point, because when we're talking about security and, especially when we're looking at ISO and things like that, how does it work with something like GDPR?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously when we started using Claude, the first thing we did was check SLAs to make sure that the service level agreements and things all aligned. And I think that's really important. But I think you can never go too far with this stuff. So making sure that your data sovereignty is a priority, and making sure that sensitive data, user information and things doesn't leave your network is actually kind of a really useful thing. There are instances of people accidentally making private chats public with these services and not realizing that everybody's seeing a kind of full thread. So I think there's less likely to be those kind of leaks.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I guess if you're just feeding information into a big system and it's training on that data as well, especially if you're using like a free version or something like that, there's not really that kind of security around it. But if you're using that smaller local model, it's on your machine, from a GDPR perspective, I mean, that's perfect, isn't it?
Yeah. It's the closed loop. So it's making sure that the data doesn't leave your network.
Brilliant. So I guess when looking at large v small models, what would you consider? If you were deciding between each one?
So for me, it's about the opportunity around the hardware. That if hardware isn't a problem and you've got investment in that area, then you can go with a lot. But I quite often look at the maximum I can safely get running on the machine that I'm hosting the language model on. So I think things like Meta's Glimmer, now that's a really great local model to run. There's also Qwen 3.8. I'm running that at 4 bits on my local machine, and that's phenomenal. I'm really enjoying running that. So I generally, I'm always testing the new models, because that's the nice thing about these models is you can just switch them out. So even in our knowledge base, the engine, the language model can be switched out at any time to try a completely different model. And that's zero effort for me, because it's just downloading another model and pointing it at that. And so you can keep on switching out models and trying the new ones as they come, and sort of checking to see if they work for your goal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess because you've said before, obviously you work with open source and things like that as well. There's new stuff coming all the time that you want to play with.
Oh, absolutely. It's just like open source software. Yeah, it's that kind of. Although these aren't, or most models aren't open weight, so you don't really know what the data is that they've been trained on. But at least you can run it on your own machine and you can own it, which is where the kind of open source debate comes from.
Perfect, brilliant. So I guess the next one that we've had is, can it read our internal system? So like your CRM, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, tool usage in agentic workflows is another conversation. But yes, the answer is you can definitely create either kind of MCP servers or other skills and tools that will help you interact with any kind of CRM, as long as they've got third-party integration. Like it's the same as if we built a portal and it needed to integrate with SharePoint. The same things can be done. Often those are not easy to do if you're not technical, but some of them now come with their own downloadable MCPs that you can just plug and play. So it is possible.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not like you're kind of building something from scratch, having to build a whole portal just to interact with a small model, hopefully. If you've got a good portal. That's the idea, is that you can actually just build something and then integrate it and then off you go kind of thing. Yeah. Perfect, brilliant. I guess you've already kind of touched on this about it making things up. I mean, does that still happen?
Yes. These are predictive engines. They're, statistically kind of get it right a lot of the time, and then sometimes just accidentally drop the ball. So you, with anything, as Buzz always does, we have a human in the loop policy where none of our code enters a project without having the full scrutiny of a human PR. And although that is a bottleneck, that's something that we kind of pride ourselves on, is that careful care within our code. And so you still have to be really careful, because it's your reputation as an organization that is, if something goes wrong and you perhaps publish a document that has inaccurate information in it, you still need the human in the loop to check things. That's critical.
I guess the idea from what you were saying earlier was more that, it can make mistakes. It's less likely to hallucinate as much as those bigger models, because it's not pulling information from absolutely everywhere.
Yeah.
Cool. Perfect. So I guess this is a really good question, actually, and it's probably going to be a bit technical, but which factors are the most important when you're building your own AI model?
I mean, the amount of accurate training data is really critical with these things. So I actually haven't done a lot of AI sort of from scratch training, because I don't have the hardware. So I think hardware is probably an important factor in that, because you need a lot of it to, the NVIDIA DGX Spark is kind of like your MVP of training setups. So a lot of accurate data and a lot of hardware to train your own models, I think.
Cool, perfect. But I mean, for the basis of what we've kind of talked about today, generally we're not looking at that kind of level of it. But if someone more technical wanted to go off and have a go, that would be the way to
absolutely.
do it. Perfect, brilliant. So which model, I'm assuming this question is just around which models you enjoy working with the most, or is it small?
So,
large models?
So I've literally just recently, I mentioned it earlier, but Qwen 3.8 at 4 bits is my go-to model at the moment. I did the Pelican on a bike test with it and fell in love with that picture. So if you don't know, the Pelican on a bike is a test that people use as a benchmarking for models. And the idea, the creator of this test decided that, there wasn't a lot of pelicans on bikes pictures on the internet. So that was a good way to test if the model is good at reasoning and sort of building up responses, because it hasn't been trained on that data. Although there is rumors of pelican maxing, which is models being trained to draw pelicans on bikes now, so they pass that benchmark easily. So yeah, some interesting stuff happening there.
So we're going to have to think of something a little bit different, like a bird on a skate, some sort of bird on a skateboard.
Pick a different vehicle, pick a different animal, and run with it.
Yeah, perfect, brilliant. Okay, cool. So I guess we'll do this as the last question now. Why is now the time to look at small language models?
Oh yeah, we wouldn't have been having this conversation a year ago. And I was doing a lot of stuff with Claude last year, and I was desperately trying to find models that would kind of do some things locally. And it was a fun experiment, but it just wasn't. The models just weren't good enough. They weren't using the hardware in an optimized way. But actually, we're at the point now where you can do some really meaningful work with them. So now is the time to be looking at this.
Perfect, great. Well, I think we'll stop at that, but thank you so much to everyone who joined and watched today and asked questions as well, and hopefully you took something really valuable out of this. If you do want to find out a bit more, we have actually written a whole blog about this, which is on our website. So go and take a look at that. And if you've got further questions, you can reach out to our team, message us on LinkedIn, drop us an email, and we can go from there. And obviously, if you're interested in actually looking at how to integrate these models into your own business, we can help with that too. So thank you very much. And thanks, Al, for joining me today.